There are places in this world where people vanish, not due to wild animals, not because they got lost or fell into a ravine. No. In some places, they disappear completely, as if pulled from the face of the earth by something that leaves behind no struggle, no noise, not even a broken twig. It was supposed to be an ordinary afternoon. September 8th, 2013, Washington State. A family of 5 had stopped for a picnic in the Olympic National Forest. The weather was clear. The air was still. The children were playing near the tree line. One moment, the youngest, Marcus, age 6, was there. The next, he wasn't. There was no scream, no sound of breaking branches, no flash of movement. His footprints led into the brush for approximately 11 feet, then stopped completely on soft pine soil. No drag marks, no animal scat, nothing. Search teams arrived within hours. Thermal drones flew over. Dogs were brought in. They couldn't find a single scent trail, not even a trace. The search lasted 10 days. Marcus was never found. This isn't an isolated case. In 1998, a park ranger in British Columbia submitted a written report that would later vanish from official logs. He wrote, "A hiker went missing on the north slope near Caribou Ridge. His camp was intact, food still hot, backpack unzipped, sleeping bag open. It was as though he stood up, walked out of the tent, and vanished mid-step." The case was quietly closed. No further information was released. In 2006, at the edge of the Great Smoky Mountains, a trail camera belonging to wildlife biologists recorded a man in a red jacket walking a fire road just after 4:12 p.m. He never came back down the trail. Rangers found the jacket hours later draped over a low branch with no signs of struggle. The footage, when reviewed frame by frame, showed the man slowing down, looking around as if listening, then walking off the trail to the left. What lies off that trail? A deep ravine? A cave? No, just more trees, just more forest. These stories have been whispered in online forums, buried in ranger logs, and occasionally covered in obscure regional news segments, always dismissed as accidents or statistical anomalies. But there is a pattern. It's not just one forest, not just one park. It's Yellowstone, Yosemite, the Cascades, the Adirondacks. From the dense pines of Oregon to the thick spruce of northern Quebec. There are recurring phrases in the reports. Last seen walking ahead of the group. Heard strange voices before disappearing. The footprints just stop. She was there, then gone. These are not standard missing persons reports. These are ruptures in reality. One former search and rescue officer from the Pacific Northwest, speaking under the condition of anonymity, said, "There are spots out there where our radios fail, where the dogs won't go, where the woods get quiet in the wrong way. And when someone disappears in one of those zones, we know we're not going to find them." His report was never filed, but his team still marks those areas, with no signs, no warnings, just an understanding passed quietly from one ranger to the next. Don't go there alone. What are these places? Why do they seem to pull people into silence? And why does the earth leave no evidence behind? In the next chapter, we'll examine the forests themselves, the geography, the folklore, and the strange convergence of disappearance hotspots around the world. Gaze too long into the woods, and eventually, the woods might gaze back. Across the northern hemisphere, there are vast tracts of wilderness where time seems to stretch, and the trees seem older than memory. And within these woods, people vanish, not in the way victims of crime or accidents disappear, but in a quieter, stranger fashion. They're there one moment, then gone the next. No struggle, no sign of departure, just empty trails and the heavy, unnatural silence of a place that has swallowed someone whole. In recent years, patterns have emerged. Across the United States and Canada, search and rescue teams, local law enforcement, and even amateur researchers have begun to map these vanishings. And the result is sobering. Clusters, dense and recurring, centered around specific forests. Places where disappearances happen over and over, sometimes decades apart, sometimes within the same season. No matter the year, The names of the trails change, but the circumstances do not. In Vermont, there's a region known unofficially as the Bennington Triangle. Between 1945 and 1950, 5 people disappeared without a trace, each under daylight, each on well-marked trails. One of them, Paula Weldon, a college student, was seen stepping onto the long trail in red clothing. Witnesses watched her walk into the woods. She never came out. A massive search turned up nothing. Bloodhounds could not find a trail. Aerial searches revealed no signs of distress or hiding. Paula and the others were simply gone. This story echoes one from 2016 in British Columbia, near the Cascade Mountains. A German tourist, 27 years old, was hiking solo on a trail near Hope. His final GPS ping placed him less than 300 meters from the parking lot. His shoes were found upright on the trail, side by side. No blood, no torn clothing, no sign of a fall. Investigators assumed a mountain lion attack, but no drag marks, no predatory signs, and no bones ever turned up, only the shoes, neatly placed, and a folded map in his backpack, marked with a spot he never reached. Stranger still are the cases where the forest seems to resist intrusion. In Oregon, several national park rangers have kept personal records, never filed officially, about regions within the forests where compasses spin, radios go silent, and wildlife refuses to enter. One ranger, who has worked the Mount Hood Wilderness for 17 years, refers to a zone 2 miles off trail from Ramona Falls as the Quiet Block. He's refused to patrol there alone since 2011. His log reads, "Something about that place isn't right. Animals won't cross into it. I've watched squirrels stop at the edge and turn back. Birds avoid the canopy. I had a trainee enter alone once. He came back 15 minutes later, pale, trembling. Said he heard his own name being whispered behind his left ear. But when he turned, there was nothing but trees." Reports like these are often buried, dismissed, or simply ignored. The parks can't afford public panic, nor can they risk accusations of superstition. But behind closed doors, in ranger stations across the continent, there are shared understandings. Warnings passed verbally, never written down. Phrases like, "Don't go beyond the second ridge," or "If your flashlight flickers near the lake, turn around." These disappearances are not limited to North America. In Eastern Europe, there is a forest outside Cluj-Napoca, Romania, that has gained a sinister reputation. Locals refer to it simply as Hoya. Visitors report nausea, lost time, strange lights. But more chilling are the testimonies of those who return from Hoya's central clearing, confused and altered. In 1975, a team of students from Bucharest entered the forest to film a documentary. Half the equipment malfunctioned. The lead researcher suffered a seizure within the first hour. When the group fled the forest, several claimed they had missing memories. One girl, whose name was redacted in official records, couldn't remember her own age for weeks. She described seeing people standing still in the trees, but not breathing. Similar legends exist in Japan's infamous Aokigahara forest. Often associated with tragedy and suicide, Aokigahara has also seen disappearances that defy logic. A 2002 report detailed the case of a middle-aged man who entered the forest with a friend during a photography trip. While framing a shot, the man walked behind a large tree and never emerged. His friend searched for 30 minutes before calling for help. Authorities combed the area for days. Nothing. The man's final photo, recovered from the digital camera left behind, showed a blurry figure in the trees. Its proportions wrong, elongated. The image was later lost in a database crash. In northern Finland, the Sami people tell of places deep within the boreal forests where the land folds back on itself. Their oral history warns not to speak aloud the names of ancestors while hiking, lest the forests think you're calling them. A regional park officer in Lapland filed an unofficial memo in 1998 about a solo hiker who vanished near Kilpisjärvi. The man's body was never found, but a thermal drone recorded an odd heat signature on the frozen lake nearby. An upright shape, unmoving, that persisted for 3 hours before vanishing entirely from the scan. Despite centuries of advancement in mapping, technology, and satellite tracking, these vanishings persist. In some cases, GPS trackers stop working moments before the disappearance. In others, they continue transmitting, but the signal loops, showing a person walking in perfect circles again and again until the device dies. Sometimes, it's as if the missing person was watching someone, or being watched. These anomalies extend beyond the physical. In Poland's Lower Silesian forest, a hiker was found alive after 6 days missing. He was dehydrated, disoriented, but unharmed. When questioned, he claimed he had been following a man in white robes who always stayed just out of reach. The man never spoke. At night, he'd disappear into the mist. The hiker insisted it had only been 1 day. His watch had stopped at 3:17 p.m., the exact time his group lost sight of him. So why forests? Why do these vast green spaces, primal, beautiful, and ancient, play host to so many disappearances? Some say it's the isolation, the difficulty of navigating dense wilderness, the silent chaos of nature, red in tooth and claw. Others argue something more complex is at work. The term window area is often used in fringe circles to describe geographic zones where reality behaves unusually, where magnetic anomalies coincide with folklore, where sightings of strange beings, time distortion, and vanishings cluster. Whatever the case, the forests persist. They do not explain, they do not accuse, they simply are. They hold the wind in their leaves, the silence in their soil, and sometimes they hold those who enter forever. Most of the time, when someone goes missing in the forest, there is no resolution, no body, no trail, only absence. But sometimes, very rarely, they come back. And when they do, they are not always the same. Their stories are fragmented, their timelines warped, their memories incomplete, unreliable, or disturbing. These survivors often struggle to articulate what they experienced, and when they try, their words twist toward metaphors, symbols, or outright silence. Still, their accounts offer us a rare window into what might lie at the heart of these vanishings, if not in fact, then in sensation. The following cases have been drawn from official ranger logs, psychological interviews, and survivor journals. All involve individuals who disappeared in the forest and returned, hours, days, sometimes weeks later, with no explanation for where they had been. Case file. 001, Daniel Chambers, age 38, Montana, 2009. Daniel was an experienced hiker and amateur geologist who had visited Glacier National Park multiple times. On September 12th, he set out alone for a 3-day solo trip into the Two Medicine region. He signed the trail register at 8:41 a.m. He was reported missing 36 hours later when he failed to meet his friend at a pre-arranged pickup spot. Search and rescue teams began canvassing the area. The weather remained clear. Conditions were excellent. No distress signals were detected. On the 5th day, Daniel walked into the ranger station at East Glacier, dazed and barefoot. He had no idea how many days had passed. His boots were gone. His watch had stopped at 2:14 p.m. on the first day. When interviewed, Daniel insisted he had only been out overnight. I remember finding this little clearing. There were stones, like standing stones, moss-covered. I sat down just to rest. Then I remember a noise, low-frequency hum. Like when you're underwater and someone knocks on the side of the pool. After that, I'm back here. How long did I say I was gone? Daniel was found to be malnourished, with early signs of hypothermia. Yet medical examination revealed no bruises, cuts, or signs of exposure. His blood work showed elevated cortisol levels, consistent with high prolonged fear. Yet Daniel claimed he was never frightened, just watched. Case file, War 014, Lily Montrose, age 17, Oregon, 1987. Lily disappeared while camping with her cousins near Willamette National Forest. She reportedly wandered from the campsite around 6:20 p.m. to go look at the creek, which was less than 100 feet away. She did not return. The family called for help within the hour. Search efforts began by nightfall. They found nothing. No footprints, No broken branches, no water disturbances. She was discovered 2 days later, standing at the edge of the same creek, dressed in the same clothes, barefoot, staring across the water. When approached, she didn't react. Medical scans revealed no injury, but a strange detail surfaced during psychological testing. Lily could not recognize herself in photographs, not recent ones, not childhood ones. She referred to herself in the third person. In an interview transcript, she stated, "She didn't want to go, but it was time. The girl with the braid, she said my name, the right name, not the one you use here. I think I followed it." When asked who she was, Lily began crying uncontrollably. She has since recovered most of her cognitive function, but has no memory of the event itself. Her family moved shortly after. Case file: Draro 38, Thomas K. and Germany, 1993, Black Forest. This account comes from a declassified psychological field study from Freiburg University, conducted in conjunction with Bavarian Forest Management. Thomas K., a forestry worker, went missing for 6 days in the southern stretch of the Black Forest. When found, he had constructed a rudimentary shelter and drawn dozens of circular glyphs in the soil surrounding it. He believed he'd only been gone a few hours. His drawings, recovered via photographs, bear eerie similarity to ancient spiral motifs used in Celtic tombs and match 14th century glyphs found carved into standing stones in Cornwall. Thomas had no history of art, anthropology, or spiritual beliefs. He repeatedly used the phrase die anderen, or the others, when describing his experience. They don't walk like we do. Their knees bend wrong, but they speak. They don't use mouths. They're very, very old. I wasn't supposed to see them. Thomas developed chronic insomnia and intense paranoia. He died in 2002 from a seizure. In the final pages of a notebook recovered from his cabin, he wrote, "You don't come back wrong. You come back different. Like you left your shadow behind and someone else picked it up." Case file: Row 72, Unidentified Child, Finland, 1961. A local Sami family reported their 8-year-old son missing during a reindeer migration along the edge of the forest near Lake Inari. Weather was cold but stable. The boy was found 11 hours later, sitting calmly inside a hollow tree stump nearly 2 kilometers from the last known location. He was humming. When asked where he'd been, he whispered something in a language his parents didn't recognize. A linguist from Helsinki reviewed the audio in 1965. He claimed the word pattern bore some resemblance to Proto-Uralic syntax, but contained no actual translation. The boy grew up to be a quiet adult, never married. His only recorded statement about the event appeared in a 1983 Sami radio interview. "The forest knew I was there. It didn't care if I left. It just wanted me to know." Case file: Wara 106, Mark Davidson, age 24, Washington State, 1990. This case is unique. Mark disappeared on the Chilkoot Trail in Alaska, Canada, as covered in official missing persons records. But hikers decades later report seeing someone resembling him near the same ridgeline, same red beard, same blue backpack, watching from afar before vanishing. In 2019, a group of hikers found a waterproof notebook wedged inside a tree hollow near the site of the original disappearance. It contained several sketches, lines of code, and a single message: "We don't die, we translate." Handwriting analysis was inconclusive. The notebook is now sealed in evidence storage under the Yukon Park Service. Patterns begin to emerge when these testimonies are laid side by side. Fragmented memories, time distortion, symbolic speech, the feeling of being watched, and the repeated theme: people encounter something, not quite human, deep in the woods. Something that communicates without language. Something that feels intelligent. And it never shouts, it only whispers. What's more, in nearly every case, electronics fail. Watches stop. Cameras malfunction. Sound recorders go blank or capture frequencies that distort the playback. In a handful of instances, researchers claim to have recorded infrasound, low-frequency audio waves below the human threshold of hearing, at the time of the disappearance or encounter. Infrasound has been linked to feelings of unease, nausea, and even hallucinations. Some theorists suggest this may explain certain psychological reactions, but in the raw data, anomalies remain. For example, one file logged by a US Forest Service worker in 2014 included magnetic field readings from a zone near Lake Chelan, Washington. The field spike recorded was strong enough to disrupt a drone's flight path. The drone later recorded heat signatures moving in irregular patterns through the trees. No wildlife matched their profile. They moved with intent. Then vanished from view. No official report followed. The forest remains open. The human mind is programmed to seek patterns. We want closure, explanation, reason. But these stories defy all of them. They exist at the blurry intersection of science and myth, memory and madness. In many of these encounters, the forest seems to select, as though certain people are drawn in not by chance, but by resonance. Maybe it's trauma. Maybe it's a genetic marker. Or maybe some people just listen more closely when the trees begin to whisper. In the next section, we'll explore the leading theories behind these vanishings, from psychological and environmental explanations to the controversial ideas of thin places, electromagnetic veil zones, and interdimensional bleed-throughs. Some explanations are rooted in fact, others in faith. But all attempt to answer the same ancient question. Why do the woods take people, and sometimes give them back, changed? When people disappear in forests, without sound, without trace, without logic, the mind demands answers. And over time, researchers, skeptics, scientists, and storytellers alike have tried to provide them. Some explanations are rooted in terrain and trauma. Others stretch the edges of known science. A few step beyond it entirely. But in all cases, the theories circle the same strange gravity, the human urge to explain the unexplainable, to map what resists being mapped. In this section, we will examine the most enduring theories, both rational and extraordinary, behind forest disappearances, and how they attempt to bring coherence to stories that feel like fractures in reality itself. Theory 1. Environmental hazards and natural disorientation. It begins with the terrain. Forests, especially vast old-growth wilderness, can disorient even experienced hikers. A single wrong turn, a moment's inattention, and a person can stray from a trail without realizing. Tree cover distorts light. Valleys amplify or mute sound. Fog plays tricks with depth perception. Search and rescue professionals often cite a phenomenon called woods shock, the acute panic a person experiences upon realizing they're lost in nature. This panic can override training, logic, even survival instincts. People have been found miles from their last known location, having shed clothing, destroyed compasses, or circled back on their own trail in loops. Further complicating matters is the soundscape of the forest. Many regions exhibit natural acoustic phenomena, amplified echoes, sudden dead zones, or reverberations that make it impossible to determine direction. A person shouting for help may in fact be heard moving away, even as they stand still. Some geologists point to karst topography, underground cave systems formed by soluble rock, as potential culprits. A hidden sinkhole or collapsed shaft can consume a human body with little disturbance on the surface. In regions like the Appalachians or the Pacific Northwest, these features are often undocumented and unmarked. But even with these hazards in mind, the strangest cases challenge natural explanation. How does someone disappear within 30 feet of others? Why are there no broken branches, no drag marks, no animal tracks? Why do even tracking dogs come up with nothing? Theory 2. Human predators and foul play. Another explanation, far more grounded yet no less disturbing, is that some of these disappearances are the result of premeditated human intervention. There are regions in North America and Eastern Europe, especially, where authorities have quietly tracked evidence of off-grid settlements, cults, or militant groups operating in remote zones. In these areas, hikers are rarely seen again, not because they got lost, but because they saw something they weren't supposed to. Some conspiracy theories extend this further, citing underground facilities, illegal testing sites, or deep state operations near national parks. These ideas often link vanishing persons with military no-fly zones, disappearing FOIA documents, or sealed ranger reports. In 2013, a leaked document from a retired US Forest Service supervisor included a line that sparked intense online speculation. There are trails we don't mark, not because they're dangerous, but because of who uses them. Of course, without evidence, these claims remain hearsay. Still, the possibility that some forests hide not just natural threats, but human ones, cannot be entirely dismissed. Theory 3. Psychological breaks and mass delusions. A more clinical approach suggests that forest disappearances may be manifestations of psychological events, individually or shared. The wilderness exerts a strange pressure on the human psyche. The silence, the vastness, the isolation. For some, this creates fertile ground for psychogenic episodes, hallucinations, fugue states, dissociation. In 1989, psychologist Dr. Marianne Hollowell coined the term green madness to describe a phenomenon observed in long-term solo hikers, a creeping conviction that the forest is conscious and watching. One of her subjects, a man named Carter Reeves, reported feeling like the trees were arranging themselves to keep him from leaving. After 6 days missing, he was found curled beneath a pine, whispering that he was not allowed to go yet. Another relevant phenomenon is shared delusion, folie à deux, or in rare cases, folie à plusieurs. In a forest setting, this can manifest as entire groups seeing or believing the same hallucinated stimulus. Skeptics use this theory to explain why some survivors speak of light beings, doorways in the air, or someone calling their true name. Under extreme stress, the brain may create meaningful fictions as a coping mechanism for terror. But again, the strange consistency between unrelated cases complicates this. Why do people from different cultures, decades, and locations report hearing voices that call them by names only they recognize? Why do multiple survivors, unaware of one another, describe seeing spiral glyphs in clearings or figures too tall, too thin to be human? If these are hallucinations, why are they so similar? Theory 4. Electromagnetic and geological anomalies. Certain areas associated with disappearances exhibit irregularities in electromagnetic activity, gravity, or geomagnetic alignment. Infrasound, low-frequency sound waves below the threshold of human hearing, has been linked to anxiety, nausea, and fear. When present in high concentration, it can induce panic or disorientation, even hallucinations. Dr. Ella Lanina Hayes, who led a 2017 study into anomalous forest zones, stated, "We measured sustained infrasound bursts in areas correlated with historic disappearances. These weren't seismic or animal in origin. They followed a pattern, almost rhythmic, almost intentional." Geomagnetic anomalies, too, are well documented. Certain mineral formations can disrupt compass readings, GPS devices, even affect human perception. Some hikers report time slips, moments where they seem to lose hours in what felt like minutes. In one Canadian case, 5 hikers all described an identical event: walking into a fog bank, seeing a set of stone steps, and hearing a sound like breathing, deep and slow. When they exited, it was nearly dusk. Their watches showed a 3-hour discrepancy. Their phones had powered off despite full batteries. These accounts align with a controversial hypothesis known as veil zones, geographical points where conditions are right for dimensional leakage. It's fringe science. But even some physicists admit that under the right electromagnetic stresses, space-time distortions are not impossible. What if some forests act as natural soft spots in reality? Not rips, but folds. Theory 5. Folklore, thin places, and the other world. Long before modern science tried to explain disappearances, mythologies already had the answers. In Irish tradition, Fairy rings were portals. Stepping into them at the wrong time could mean days or centuries lost in another realm. In Slavic lore, Leshy spirits guarded the forest, tricking wanderers deeper into the woods. In Native American legends, there are spirit places, sacred zones where the land remembers its own rules and forgets ours. The Sami people of northern Europe speak of roav, unclean places where reality bends. Travelers passing through must offer bread, blood, or breath, or risk being taken. These stories share a common thread. Certain places are alive, and they decide who stays. Modern researchers often dismiss these beliefs as primitive metaphors, but metaphors have weight. In a 2020 cultural anthropology review, Dr. Maria Collins noted, across 37 cultures, forest disappearances are framed not as accidents, but as transformations. The lost are not gone. They are changed, taken, chosen. This idea echoes in recent internet forums and digital age folklore. Concepts like the backrooms, liminal spaces, and false memories reflect a growing awareness that our world may contain cracks, zones where the rules pause, where something else bleeds in. Whether these are ancient forces, alien intelligences, or something entirely unclassified, we cannot say, but they are remembered in stories, in symbols, and in the silence that follows a name being called just once in the trees. Theory 6. Interdimensional displacement. Among the most extreme explanations is the idea that people don't die in the forest. They slip out of our dimension altogether. Proponents of this theory suggest that the Earth contains naturally occurring gateways, tiny, unstable rips in space-time that can temporarily open under specific conditions. These theories draw from quantum mechanics, string theory, and even ancient texts. The suggestion is not that these people are taken by creatures, but that they walk into a reality our minds aren't wired to perceive. Under this framework, the spiral glyphs, often drawn by survivors, are interpreted as projected representations of higher dimensional space, like a 2D shadow of a 4D object. One controversial paper, unpublished but widely circulated online, posits that forests with specific geological and magnetic signatures act as interdimensional lenses. When aligned with lunar or solar cycles, they allow consciousness, or the body itself, to shift. It sounds outlandish, but it fits. The vanished leave behind no trace, no struggle, only a pause in the pattern of the world, as if something skipped a beat. Across these 6 theories, we find no unified answer, but we find echoes, motifs, recurring images that ripple across science and myth, case files and campfire tales, stone spirals in clearings, light that pulses like breath. Voices calling in forgotten languages, names whispered in tones no human throat could produce, a sense that the forest knows more than it shows. Maybe it's all metaphor, maybe it's madness, or maybe, somewhere behind the tree line, something else is waiting, not hunting, just watching, and every so often, choosing. In the next section, we bring together everything we've learned, the maps, the cases, the testimonies, and the theories, and look for the deeper pattern. Is there a cycle? A countdown? A purpose? We'll also examine the idea that the forests don't take people at random, but as part of something larger, something older, a process still unfolding. Patterns, they are how we survive. We learn the rhythm of tides, the turning of seasons, the way the moon waxes and wanes. We measure time by what returns and fear what doesn't. For decades, the stories of people vanishing in forests seemed like isolated tragedies, accidents, missteps in vast, unforgiving wilderness. But as records mounted, as the dots connected across time and terrain, another possibility began to emerge. What if these disappearances are not random? What if they are part of a pattern, a rhythm, a selection? It began with a map, not the kind made for hikers, but one pieced together from missing persons bulletins, ranger logs, archived news clippings, and whispered reports. When overlaid against topographic data, the vanishings clustered, not evenly, but in spirals, rings, shapes that pulsed outward from old growth centers like ripples from a dropped stone. A 2014 statistical study by an anonymous data analyst, published only briefly on the dark web before being removed, examined 1 to 200 unsolved disappearances across the continental United States. The result, nearly 68% occurred within 7 kilometers of regions classified as biological persistent zones, areas where ecological succession has remained stable for over 10,000 years. In other words, the oldest parts of the forest, the parts that remember. Even more unsettling was the time component. Disappearance rates spiked around certain dates, the solstices and equinoxes, particularly the summer solstice and winter solstice, with a secondary peak around the autumnal equinox. Between June 19th to 23rd and December 19th to 23rd, vanishings occurred at more than triple the average daily rate. Skeptics call this statistical noise, but survivors tell a different story. One former forestry worker, assigned to Olympic National Park between 1982 and 1997, maintained a private log of all missing person cases. In the margins of his notes, he wrote one phrase again and again: "The forest chooses." What does that mean? Some believe the forest is responding to specific signals from us. A field researcher named Dr. Isaac Fenlow, before his mysterious death in 2021, had spent over 15 years mapping bioelectrical patterns in forest systems. His theory was controversial, that forests function as neural networks, transmitting signals via fungal and root systems, what some call the wood wide web. But Fenlow took it further. He believed certain forests had developed a type of reactive consciousness, that they responded to human presence, not just passively, but intelligently. When he died in a cabin fire outside Coos Bay, Oregon, all that remained were charred notebooks and fragments of a final voice memo. One of the few decipherable lines: "It's not random. The trees, the ground. It recognizes pattern. It's reading us, sorting us, and some of us, it calls by name." This brings us to a more esoteric concept, the selection hypothesis. This theory, rooted in both indigenous folklore and fringe science, suggests that disappearances are not accidental or predatory, but purposeful. The forest, whether as sentient biome, interdimensional threshold, or vessel for something older, selects individuals based on certain criteria: cognitive receptivity, those who are more sensitive to frequencies, energy fields, or altered states of consciousness; trauma history, people who have experienced near-death events, loss, or major psychological breaks; biological resonance, genetic markers, blood type correlations, or electromagnetic profiles that match a specific signature; behavioral anomalies, subjects drawn to solitude, silence, or who display dissociative tendencies before vanishing. This would explain why some people, those alone, those damaged, those seeking, disappear without resistance. They follow something, or they're invited. In the recovered writings of Dr. Sarah Holbrook, a hydrologist who studied Crater Lake in the 1980s and disappeared in 1989, she left this note in a sealed envelope marked, "To be opened only if I vanish." The water doesn't drown, it transmits. It sends what it selects to somewhere we aren't ready to name. Some of us hear it, we hear what's under the silence, and it's not malevolent, it's evolutionary. This idea, that the forest is not hostile but operating on a different logic, appears again and again. In 2003, a park visitor named Angela Reynolds reported losing 2 hours while hiking alone in Redwood National Park. Her camera recorded nothing unusual until the final photo, a tree line lit by an unknown orange source. The light doesn't match sunrise or sunset angles. In the corner of the frame, a human silhouette, elongated, mid-stride, yet blurred, as if pulled sideways through time. When interviewed, Angela said she remembered one moment clearly. "I was thinking of my grandmother. She died a year ago. I whispered her name. And I swear, the trees whispered it back." She has never returned to the forest, but her camera sits in evidence, image untouched. Timestamp skipped forward by 13 minutes she cannot account for. In 2016, amateur researchers began using ELF, extremely low frequency, receivers near disappearance zones. The signals picked up were irregular, but contained patterns, non-random clusters resembling binary sequences. A computer engineer later translated one string into ASCII characters. It spelled, "We listen to." The device later short-circuited. The forest where the reading was taken, Shoshone National Forest in Wyoming, has had 6 unsolved disappearances since 1983. One ranger, who asked to remain anonymous, said, "I've heard static on the radio that sounds like breathing. I've seen lights where there's no power. And once, I swear, I saw someone watching us through the trees, but it didn't blink, and it wasn't human." All these points, the seasons, the signals, the selection, suggest something more structured than random vanishing. If we think of the Earth as a system, then the forests are more than scenery. They are processes, perhaps even gateways. And within that framework, disappearances are not loss, they are conversion. In one final case, a woman named Chelsea Alvarez disappeared while hiking alone near Lassen Volcanic National Park in 2020. She was an experienced backpacker. Her gear was top grade. Her GPS worked until 2:43 p.m. when her Trac abruptly stopped mid-trail. 2 days later, her fiancé received a voicemail from her number. It was mostly static. But beneath the static, when filtered, was a single whispered word. Remember, if there is a pattern, it is this. People go alone. Something watches. A sound, a light, a name. And then, silence. It doesn't happen to everyone, just a few each year, like a forest breathing in, and sometimes exhaling. In the final section, we'll return to the question that started it all. Why do some people vanish into forests without a trace? And perhaps more unsettling, what happens to them after they do? Because the pattern suggests a direction, a destination. And if we can follow the map of the vanished, maybe we can understand where they've gone, or why they were chosen in the first place. If the forest takes, where does it take them? If the vanished don't die, if their bodies are not found, their gear not scattered, their footsteps not traced, then we are forced to consider a more difficult, more disorienting question. What if they went somewhere else, not somewhere in the forest, but through it? A place beyond maps, a place that calls to them, and only them. We begin with the ones who almost didn't return, not the lost, but the almost taken. In 2007, backpacker Jaron Lyle was hiking with a friend in northern Idaho's Selway Bitterroot Wilderness. He paused to take a photograph of a distant ridge, wandered 10 meters off trail, and was never seen again. Until 18 hours later, when he walked into camp with no explanation and a haunted stare. He was carrying a photograph he had never taken. It showed him, standing on the ridge, facing away from the camera. No one could explain it. Not the timestamp, not the angle. The photo paper was slightly warped, as if aged by heat, and it didn't match the camera model he carried. When questioned, Jaron said, "There was a doorway. It didn't look like a door. It just felt like a place I could step into. There was a sound, like language, but from inside my chest, and I think I almost did." He later burned the photo. 2 years later, he disappeared for good. Same trail, same month. There are stories of people who vanish and come back decades later, unchanged. The famous case of Erin Nagel, a 9-year-old girl who vanished near Alberta's Banff National Park in 1981 and reappeared in 2006, unchanged in age, wearing the same jacket, asking for her father, who had died in 1999. DNA confirmed her identity. Medical tests showed she hadn't aged a day. But her brain scans revealed anomalous activity, unusual synaptic growth in regions associated with spatial memory and language learning. When asked where she'd been, she simply replied, "In the place between the sky and the rocks. It's full of colors that don't have names." Within 3 months, She stopped speaking entirely. Today she lives in a private care facility. She draws constantly, geometries, shapes that move when seen out of the corner of the eye. Scientists say it's a form of obsessive ideation, but the drawings match mathematical models used in theoretical astrophysics. No one taught her that. What emerges from these stories is not just mystery, but consistency. Time does not behave normally for the taken. Some report no time has passed. Others report days in a place where the sun never sets. Some describe lights. Others describe tunnels made of roots and bone and whispering. One survivor, kept anonymous in a 1995 case file, said, "I was in the forest, but deeper. It looked the same, but it was like being inside a memory the land had of itself, and I could feel it watching me. It asked me questions, but not with words. It showed me things I didn't know I remembered, things that hadn't happened yet." He died 3 months later from a brain aneurysm. In his final notebook were 2 sentences written over and over. "I think it's learning from us. I think it's dreaming with us. Indigenous knowledge has long spoken of these possibilities. In Lakota belief, certain canyons are living spirits. They test your intentions. In Maori cosmology, past sights in the bush can lead to Te Po, the long night, a realm between worlds. The Sami tell of mirror places in the snow-covered pines, where your reflection can walk away from you and never return. These aren't just myths, they're instructions. They teach us what the modern mind resists, that the world does not owe us explanation, that some boundaries are not meant to be mapped, only respected. Modern science still struggles with this. There is no database for those who returned different, no entry in a spreadsheet for dream-induced cognition or loss of shadow recognition, no budget for searching realities that don't fit our current dimensional model. But researchers like Dr. Emma Valdez have begun laying the groundwork. Her 2022 unpublished white paper, Dimensional Drift and Cognitive Tethering in Wilderness Events, proposes a simple but staggering thesis. These disappearances and returns represent points of dimensional porosity. Some forests function as intersectional zones between space-time configurations. When conditions align, emotionally, geomagnetically, even linguistically, individuals can shift perception and presence into adjacent existential strata. It reads like science fiction. But Valdez's paper was peer-reviewed internally at a major West Coast university, and since publishing it, she has not been seen. So where do they go? Somewhere that remembers our shape, if not our names. Somewhere that listens. Somewhere that waits. It may not be malevolent. It may not be divine. It may simply be a place older than language, with its own rules and its own hunger. A consciousness we barely qualify to notice us, unless we think too deeply or look too long. In the final video footage of a vanished hiker's GoPro found in the Smoky Mountains in 2018, there's a moment, frame 13743, where the forest seems to breathe. The trees don't move, but the shadows shift forward, as if reaching. The light refracts in patterns not possible under current optical physics. In the audio track, reversed and slowed, a voice, low, multitonal, can be heard speaking something. 3 syllables, untranslatable. But when played for different linguistic AI systems, all returned a single phonetic approximation. Come home. So maybe that's the final horror and the final hope. That those who vanish are not lost, not taken, not dead, but home. Not our home, but one they've always belonged to. One that called to them in dreams, in grief, in solitude. And when they cross the threshold, knowingly or not, the world sealed behind them. They don't scream, they don't fight, because they recognize it. Because maybe they were never meant to stay here to begin with. If you ever find yourself walking deep in the forest, and the air goes still, and the animals fall silent, and the sun seems too quiet, listen carefully. You might hear your name, not your given one, but the one the trees remember. And if you answer, If you follow, you may not return, but you won't be afraid, because you'll understand. The forest doesn't take, it invites, and sometimes you say yes.